Welcome back, crime sceners. Time to go back to facts, not theories. I spent the last public holiday pretending to die on the back porch after my son pretended to stab me in the hallway. Now, I know many of you are thinking right now, how ironic, but let's go back to the actual crime scene because there are a few things there that I think I may have got wrong. As usual, the disclaimer, please note that any statements or opinions expressed here are purely speculative and are not intended to accuse any individual or entity of wrongdoing. Unless otherwise stated as fact, the information provided reflects personal observations or hypotheses. Any conclusions drawn from this content should be viewed in this context. And don't forget to like, subscribe and share this around so we can get as many eyes on this as possible. So I did a bit of research on blood spatter and on some of the medical stuff to do with Nanette's injuries. And I've changed my mind on what I think actually happened. But before I start, I want to just update my opinion on the radio. I think now I think that Nanette actually did turn it on herself. I previously did not believe this because I couldn't work out why a woman who was afraid of being murdered would deliberately put on a loud radio. I thought it must have been the killer to drown out her screams. But when would he have had the opportunity? If he did it before he attacked, surely she would wonder why someone was turning on the radio so loudly. Or at all. That means he had to have done it mid-attack, which makes no sense at all, and probably means he would have dripped some blood into the bedroom and there wasn't any in there. So I think Nanette probably did turn it on herself, and she felt safe doing so because she wasn't alone in the house and she felt safe. Just like when she was apparently listening to music with headphones on the night her car was attacked. But back to what this video is actually about. I'll just go over what I originally thought, and then I'll go over my thinking process now that I've learnt a few more things, and also what made me think to relook in the first place, because that's a bit of a question in and of itself. So I originally thought that the killer did not follow Nanette into the laundry. This was because there were no noticeable footprints on the laundry floor. And that's not to say there weren't any, of course. I mean, the photos aren't great. They are from 1984. But that's what I thought. And there is the pool of blood here. And I would say most of the blood is in the laundry. But most of the blood in the laundry looks like a dripping kind of blood. Like she was standing there and it was like just dripping. So combined with the lack of footprints in the laundry, I assumed that the whole attack took place in the hallway. Then Nanette has stumbled out through the laundry and it's just been like dripping as she's gone along. But this was a question too, because why would she go out the back when there were weapons by the door and the front door straight out onto the road where she can get some help? I wondered if there was another person blocking her path. Someone else said that they think she ran out the back to scream out to Greg because she knew he was over the back fence. And another person said they thought it was because she knew the back door was unlocked and so it was easier. But the blood spatter didn't make much sense to me either. I mean, there's this big pool of blood here. Drops on the wardrobe are probably cast off from the knife. But there's no blood between here and here, like at all. You've got this large pool of blood here, and then you've got this spray pattern here down low towards the floor, but there's nothing in between. Then there's little bits on the doors going into the laundry, then all this dripping pattern in the laundry. And another thing that didn't make sense to me is the way that Nanette ended up, like the position she was in when she died. I mean, we did this again and again, and I just never ended up full on my back with my head up this end and my feet down that end. But how I started thinking about this was that I was thinking about the knife and the kitchen. In a previous video, it was discussed that I believe that the killer went out the front door and he had to have been carrying the knife because it's never been found. But I was still wondering about the knife that was in the kitchen. If you remember from a long time ago, I mentioned that there was a 4-knife block in the kitchen, and the largest knife from that knife block was found on the kitchen bench next to a couple of drops of blood. I found this strange because it's obviously not the murder weapon, although it kind of looks like it is. Then I started thinking about why did the killer go into the kitchen? I assumed it would be to rinse the knife, but I think the spot of blood on the back of Nanette's car came from the knife. So I guess technically it could have come off of clothing, but I don't think that's the case. I think it was from the knife as he was running out. So if it was from the knife, he didn't wash it, did he? And they didn't find any blood in the drain either. And there were blood droplets kind of probably coming off a knife on the way out as well, on the tiles by the front door and all that sort of stuff. So I don't think that he washed the knife. So then I started thinking, so what did he go into the kitchen for? I'm really hoping it wasn't for a snack. But then I started thinking about how the police think it's Craig's missing chef's knife. And then I thought, was this set up? I mean, if the killer used Craig's chef's knife in a fit of rage, then he thinks he doesn't want anyone to think it's Craig's knife. Did he drop a few blood droplets on the counter and put the other knife there to make police believe that it was the knife from the knife block and not Craig's chef knife? I mean, is that what he was doing in the kitchen? Then I started wondering if this was a little bit too far-fetched, and I've watched way too many movies, which made me think about the mindset of the killer. I mean, we're thinking that it was, attack, okay, you're done, I'm out of here. But we also think it was someone known to Nanette. To just attack someone so viciously suggests a psychopathic kind of person, probably not known to the victim, and probably someone who has done this before. But if it was someone known to Nanette, their mentality would have been completely different. So before I say what I think happened based on the experiments that I conducted with my son, I'll just go over the injuries because it will make more sense to you when I say what I think happened. Otherwise, you'll just be sitting there thinking I'm crazy. So firstly, she had a 2.5 centimetre wound in the skull, which had penetrated the skull, pushing a chip of bone into the meninges. There was no associated brain damage. The meninges are, this is what I've just learned, research is pretty interesting actually. The meninges are 3 protective membranes that surround the brain and the spinal cord, forming a critical part of the central nervous system's defense system. They cushion and protect the delicate tissues from injury and infection. If the meninges are penetrated, symptoms can include headache, confusion, drowsiness, nausea, then rapid deterioration if untreated. She also had a 3 centimetre wound below the left ear, directed downwards and forwards for 7 centimetres. The wound had cut the internal jugular vein and the left side of the larynx. There was bleeding into the tissues and into the air passages and lungs, and there was a 2 centimetre wound behind and below the right ear, directed downwards and forwards for 6 centimetres. The wound had cut the subclavian veins with massive bleeding into the right chest. The big mistake that I made in regard to the neck wounds is that I always thought that neck wounds spurted, and I couldn't see where there were any big blood spurts. But apparently the jugular is a vein and not an artery. Therefore, it is under low pressure and when cut causes the blood to flow out steadily and heavily. It's the arteries that spurt. That's interesting, isn't it? But it also said that with these injuries, you will bleed out really quickly. And that got me thinking, was she really stabbed in the neck in the hallway? Would she have made it as far as she did? So anyway, with that all that being said, this is what I think happened and why. I think she was attacked after speaking to someone in this room. Why? Because of the pantyhose. If I left my pantyhose in my son's room, they'd be thrown out in 2 seconds flat. The other day I asked him to take my clothes off the line because it was about to rain, and he left all my underwear on there because he didn't want to touch it. My point is, other than my son has serious problems, is that I don't think the pantyhose were there from days before. She was going to be wearing a skirt that night, and I think she would have worn them with her outfit that night. And she probably had them in her hand while she was getting ready and talking to this person at the same time. I think she put the radio on while she was getting ready because she felt safe enough to, because she wasn't alone. She was there with someone she trusted. And I think she's gone to turn around, probably gone and undone her button there because she knows that she's walking into her room to go and get changed. But I think she's turned around and she's walked down. I think he shoved her down first. I think she was on her way out of the room and he shoved her over. I think he's then tried to stab her and she has put up a hell of a fight. She had a major injury to her hand. The metacarpal was severed, which, by the way, I got the metacarpal confused before with the phalanges. The phalanges are in the fingers. The metacarpal is actually in the hand, but the metacarpal was severed. But she also had many, many defensive wounds on her hands. So this looks like she really put up a huge fight. But it would also indicate that she was on her back at this time and she was putting her hands up to try to defend herself. But we saw that she was probably on her stomach when she kicked the hole in the door. So that's if the hole was in fact even done that day. We don't know if that hole wasn't there for years. But I'm assuming it was done that day, which is why I think he shoved her down. She's landed face down. She's kicked the door trying to turn over while fighting this wanker. I originally thought that she must have had her neck stabbed in the hallway because A, the pool of blood, and it was a large pool of blood as well, and B, because she didn't scream. But here's why I don't think that anymore. Like, for one, the screaming doesn't mean anything. The radio was on, so if she was screaming, she might not have been heard. And not everyone screams loudly while they're being attacked. You know, some people just try to fight. Also, I think that as she was fighting, he's managed to get her in the head. Damaging the meninges can cause headache and confusion. It also causes massive blood loss and dizziness. I think the pool of blood by the bedroom door was caused by the head injury. I mean, I was once shoved off of a bed and I landed on a power board that was next to the bed and it cracked my head. It was only small. They didn't even have to stitch it. They just glued it. But the amount of blood was unreal. There was so much blood on the power board and on the floor. And I have long blonde hair and the whole thing looked red, just bright red hair, like the whole thing. It was amazing how much blood came out of this tiny head wound. And I said to the doctor, I can't believe it's small because there was so much blood. And he said, oh yeah, head wound will bleed like I don't know what. So that would account for the rather large pool of blood that's there by the door. So just to recap, I think he's pushed her over. She's kicked the hole in the door trying to turn over. And he's standing above her, slashing at her. Standing above her to start with because I think the blood on the wardrobe is cast off from the knife. Then there's been a huge struggle. He's managed to stab her in the forehead and severely damage her hands. And there's also a cut down her arm as well, which I think happened in the fight. And then he stabbed her in the top of the head. I think this has stopped the struggle. I think this has caused her to be a bit dazed and confused. It may have also caused her to pass out for a minute. But I think she stopped fighting, and I think that's when he went into the kitchen. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, based on what? Well, Nanette has marks on the back of her head. They are obviously from a knife, but seems to be more like scratches than stabs. The scratches are deeper than what you would get if you scratched your arm on a branch or something like that, but not really deep enough to really cause damage. It's kind of like, imagine you were running and trying to stab someone who was also running, but every time you reached out to slice, they were just out of reach because they were running too, so you were just kind of getting them with the tip of the knife each time. That's what it kind of looks like. And let's remember, I am no expert, but that's what it looks like to me. So I think Nanette was running from this person at some point, and the only place she could have been running is through the laundry. I think this blood here was coming from her hand. Apparently you can tell the direction of blood spatter by the tail. The blood is going in the direction that the tail is pointing. Now the blood here was pointing straight across, like towards the front door. And some of it was pointing down on about a 45-degree angle, but also in the direction of like the front door. So most of the damage to her hands was on the left one, which would make sense that she was on her back and the blood was splashing across this wall down here. It was low to the floor as well, so it kind of fits. But I think the stab to the top of the head has stopped the struggle. I think the killer has panicked and gone into the kitchen. He's probably wondering what on earth he's supposed to do now. He's just stabbed someone. He's probably realizing he's going to be in a lot of trouble. I think the blood was dripping off the knife while it was on the counter because there doesn't seem to be any other reason that he'd be in the kitchen. So I think he's decided to go back to see the damage he's done. But I think at this point, Nanette has stood up. And I think she's tried to go out through the lounge room to either the weapons by the front door or just out the front door. But as she's gone to go down there, he's come back. And that's why she's taken off toward the back door. This explains why she went out the back and not the front. I did wonder in a previous video if there was a second person there blocking her exit, but now I think it was just the same person. It would also explain the blood on the toilet and laundry doors being at standing height now and her running. I don't think she had been stabbed in the neck yet because I don't think she would have made it as far as she did, given what I read about how her injuries would have made her bleed and what would have happened to her when they did. So he's run after her, trying to slice her as she goes and getting the back of her head. But when she's been stopped at the locked door, I think that's when she copped the deep cut to her neck. It's on the right-hand side, so it makes sense that she was stabbed by a right-hander. But I think she's then managed to get outside and try to take off down the ramp. But I think he's grabbed her and pulled her back. I'm guessing to make sure she doesn't get too far away and start screaming out in the backyard. So he's pulled her backwards, and that explains the position she landed in. And they've taken out the clothes horse in the struggle, and she's come down and landed on it. I think then she's tried to get back up, and he stabbed her behind the ear. This explains the stab on the left side of her, because she'd be on her back now. So it still fits with a right-handed person. Then that's been too much for her. She's unfortunately expired. Now I think he's gone back into the house through the dining room door. Remember, it was open in the crime scene pictures, and I didn't know if police had opened it, but I think that the killer probably went through that door. Whether he opened it or not, or whether it was opened by somebody else before this all happened, I don't know. But I think he's gone back in through that dining room door. Then he's gone out the front door, splashing blood across the foyer, on her car, whatever. And then he's gotten into a car in the driveway and driven off to dump the knife. So after doing more research on her injuries and blood spatter, that's what I think happened. So what do you think, killer? Am I close? Am I way off? Let me know in the comments. And the rest of you, let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think this could have happened like I think it happened, or have I forgotten anything? Oh, and one more thing. Nanette's head was turned towards the back fence when she died. And I wondered if Greg could have, in fact, seen her eyes open from where he was standing, as he claims. Now, I got my son to lie down in the same position, and I could not see if his eyes were open or not. But I am 5'2". So we swapped places, and he said that he could tell that my eyes were open, but only from the position of my eyelashes. He couldn't actually see my eyes though. My son is 5'11", 5'11 and a half. So Greg would probably have to have been at least this tall or taller to be able to see that her eyes were open. So what does that mean? Probably nothing, but it's good to have the information. If you want to help us solve the Nanette Ellis case, please make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates, and please share this around to as many people as possible, because you never know who's going to have that final piece of the puzzle. So that's it for now. Stay safe out there.